Oh, it's great. It's funny. I had to go look because I thought, geez, the sax player and the piano player look like twins too. Obviously, they're not, but they are brothers. Okay,
Well,
stop cheering. Hello.
Well,
they're twins.
they are twins. They're identical
They're
twins.
twins too.
Yeah,
I was like, God, they look like twins.
yeah. It was Twin
That's
Fest 2015.
really how interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, that's kind of trippy, isn't it?
It yeah, I mean I mean there's a few of us out there, a few sets out there. I researched it once because Alan and I did a like a master class at NYU on being a twin in jazz. And so I was curious how many twins were out there playing jazz, and there's a few, there's a number of them.
Is there really? That's
Yeah.
interesting. Well, my sisters were twins. They're 4 years older than me, and they sang. One played piano, so we all grew up, around the piano. But they had very similar instruments.
Hmm.
They were identical also, and I mean, they sounded a lot alike, and so it was really nice to hear them, and but I don't think I know personally. I don't think I know any other twins who are in jazz, especially.
Yeah, there's I don't know, Alan, I don't know if you know more than I mean, famously, well, I think they were fraternal twins, but weren't the
Yeah,
Brecker brothers fraternal? The Breckers?
were they twins?
Were they fraternal twins, or am I just totally making that up?
I
Or
don't
were they just
think they were
siblings?
I think you're making it up.
they're
Okay,
brothers, but
I'm rewriting history right now. No, but there's some twins that are great, a little more straight ahead jazz. The Anderson twins,
Oh, okay.
The Strickland brothers are identical twins. They're Marcus and EJ, drummer and saxophone player. Um, the Mason twins, the trombone and
I don't know if they're. I don't
are they?
think they're twins, but they're a couple years apart. I think.
Oh, I thought they were twins.
I think. We'll have to ask them.
Yeah,
There's a
being
lot of
twins makes a
potential here,
difference.
though, for marketing, which we haven't tapped into as of yet.
By the way, I have a comment already on YouTube from Taylor Hatch, who's a guitarist, and he said Jigsaw has been one of his favorite big band records throughout the quarantine.
Oh wow! Thank you, Taylor.
Yeah. So these are the Ferber brothers, ladies and gentlemen. It's really exciting to have both of them on. I mean, even individually, I would have been, I would have been thrilled, and now I'm doubly thrilled. And it's funny. It's hard. I know when you're twins because of my sisters. It's hard to have people separate you. Although you guys are certainly have your own distinct careers. But I'm sure you get so much attention as twin brothers as well. But you work together a lot too, don't you?
Uh, yeah, quite a bit. I mean, Alan can speak for his own band, but we grew up playing together. Obviously, we played together since I think the first band we played in together was Buzz Eady's ensemble in fifth grade in junior high school. I think, yeah, really, really early on, and basically from that moment we've been playing together through, and we went to college together, junior high, high school, college, and then we lived together in LA after we went to UCLA. Lived together in LA for a few years, freelance together, moved to New York basically at the same time, lived together there, and we're just the whole time playing together. So obviously there's a musical connection that goes way back. And I mean, Alan can speak for his own projects, but I've played on many of his albums and projects, and again, like just hearing how his playing, his writing has developed over our lifetime. I mean, I kind of know I kind of a feeling about how to interpret his music and his writing. So, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I take it too much for granted because, like my drum parts, my drum notation
Oh,
was just absolutely terrible because
No.
I never really had to write a drum part. And as an arranger, that was a band leader, it actually puts you in pretty much a giant bind if your brother can't make the gig. Because then it's like, okay, now what? The drummer's working off of essentially nothing. I was sort of throwing him any, maybe a bass part or something that I had
yeah.
laying around, or just a really poorly written drum part, and just sort of taking for granted that I was all going to be there because he already knew, he knew the music and he knew my aesthetic. I remember, the first time I had a sub particularly for my big band, with larger ensemble projects, it's a little more pronounced because it's more intricate writing and you can't really get away with super loose interpretation often depending on the chart. And I just remember thinking, wow, I have no idea how to communicate with this drummer. They're asking for things and I'm like, what are you even asking for?
So interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I learned my lesson, but
Is that
I think my parts are a little bit better at this point.
what was he asking for that you couldn't understand, that you
Oh,
couldn't
they were
get?
just, I mean, there were so many details that weren't in the parts. I mean, so many written ensemble figures that you just sort of inherently knew, and none of it was written in the part. It was like, what did I expect?
How did you end up dealing with that? Did you end up writing it out, or
No,
talking
because at that
about
point
it?
it was a sound check for the gig, you know.
Oh,
So I mean, he's a great drummer. So it was John Riley. He was the first solo. He was the first sub for Mark, and so he knew exactly what to do. Of course, in the end, we talked a little bit, and I gave him some details. But for me, it was one of those
it's like, shit.
on the bandstand kind of learning experiences that you can only get in the heat of battle. And the gig actually turned out great because he's such a great intuitive musician. But for me, it was a little bit of a wake up call.
Yeah.
So the gig went great. It had really good spontaneous energy, but I just I couldn't help but to think like, what's going through his mind? Like this punk is giving me a chart with no information. But he was super cool about it because he's a total pro. But anyway, yeah, I learned my lesson.
That's so funny.
Would you say that sorry to be the interviewer now, but I'm curious myself. Would you say that it was that because your charts now are pristine? I mean, anyone could walk in. I mean, they're super clear, very organized, visually pleasing. I mean, easy on the eyes. Would you say that experience kind of made you rethink your chart writing, kind of clean up everything in terms of having it, readable to anyone coming in to sub? Was it that experience, or was it something else?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Because first of all, it was mildly traumatic. I had this drummer who I admired for years and years come in to play my gig, which in and of itself was a big deal for me. Um,
Just so you know, for those who don't know, John Riley has been the longtime drummer for the Village Vanguard Orchestra. He kind of,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's really great.
yeah,
Yeah, so
legendary drummer. I mean, particularly in the big band format. So I think that I yeah, I mean, I thought like, well, if anybody knows, or if anybody, uh, I mean, he of all people would be the first person I would kind of go to, particularly at that point, for advice. So it was the best advice I could have gotten at that moment, and it just happened to be on the bandstand in a sort of a pressure cooker environment. But fortunately, and the other thing to keep in mind too with all this stuff is that these gigs in New York, I remember it was a gig at the Jazz Gallery. I mean, they don't pay that much, I mean, these gigs are no one's getting rich.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're playing for peanuts, and they're playing because they just want to do it. They want to have some fun and play some new music. So for me, it was like, wow, am I making this kind of a drag for him?
Yeah.
Like, if the only reason he's coming out to do this is to have a night to play some charts. He's a busy guy. Am I making this a drag? I mean, the one thing as a band leader is I want my gigs to be challenging and fun.
Yeah.
Those two things, because they're not going to get paid. Basically, I mean, they're going to get paid, but not enough because it's a
Yeah.
big band.
Yeah.
So that was the other thing, is that with good, clean, clear charts, I think it sets up everybody to have a better time because they have less to worry about. You can get right to the music and have a good time. So I think for me, that was the main thing that was going through my head, was like, I just want them to have a good time and everybody to have a good time. And that comes with good preparation, and not
Especially
only
with a big band, right? Whew.
with a big band, yeah, but with, as with anything, it's like preparation is everything. By the time you get to the recording or the gig, it's too late. You've either done the preparation or not. So it's, yeah.
Mark, I was reading, your biography and stuff. Do you compose too and arrange?
I haven't. I've been sort of just sideman, primarily a sideman for my entire career up to
Yeah.
this point. But it's funny. It's like I've always been looking, in normal times for a way to write more, for a way to get to the piano. Because I started as a pianist, or way back. I mean, I'm not any good, but I wasn't then. I'm not now. But I like to use it. I am trying to use. I was looking for an excuse to sort of get into writing, get into composing, learning, different things outside of just interpreting other people's music. So I've definitely used this time off to to work on that, to sit at the piano every day, learn learn harmony, just write stuff. I've written a few tunes. I've recorded them virtually,
Yay.
and it's been great. It's been really cool.
Yeah.
We could play one later, possibly. I mean, it's not really.
Oh,
I'm also learning how to put
garage
together stuff.
band or something.
I'm using Logic, but yeah, like probably everyone else is trying to do.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it's been great to sort of visit that aspect of music that I've neglected for so long.
Yeah.
Only because I've been very busy over the years, just freelancing, touring, going out of town. It's hard, and of
Yeah.
course people do juggle that. I just haven't, for whatever reason. I've just kind of focused on practicing the drums and learning other people's music, and teaching a little bit. So yes, it's only recently have I sort of explored
Interesting.
that side.
Well,
Yeah.
I think the muse knows what you're into, and stimulates you towards that, I mean, I have different, I don't know if it's, my Gemini nature or whatever, but I have all these different things that I do. And so one thing like writing a book, it'll sit back here until I just feel like I feel a great urge to write a book, and then I bring it out and work on it. But I mean, years can go by actually. But writing, yeah, for me too, you're probably a little better, in a better position because you're probably playing with people even these days. And so you can bring out a song and try it out, with a live group. And for me, it's a little more complicated because I have to have a situation where there's musicians around. I mean, like you, my piano playing is like, so I can write on it and practice and all that stuff, but I need somebody to play with me to be inspirational.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, we actually only recently, Alan and I were in New York playing something at the Korean Cultural Center. It's a streaming gig with this amazing big band composer. So we went out there for that, but also Alan booked some time to record some of his music, and it was great because it's kind of the first time. Well, not the first time, but one of the few times during the pandemic that we have played with real other musicians in real time in one space.
Yeah.
And so that was very refreshing to sort of, it was a
Yeah.
big band record, but we just put skeletal parts together and a rhythm section to sort of build from that, and then overdub the horns later, which I guess Alan's going to work out with horn players and whatever else. So, but it was cool to, yeah, like you're saying. I mean, there's nothing like it. Sometimes you don't do it for a while, and then you do it, and you realize everything immediately. You remember immediately why that's one of the most important things to do in music.
Yeah. Last night I actually went. I heard at the last minute. Actually, Toby Simmons is on. She told me about it, and she was there too. We went to this place in Toluca Lake, which it's called Michael's, but it used to be. I don't know. You guys probably weren't in town when it was Alphonse's. That was one of the old jazz clubs in town in LA, and straight ahead. Sarah Vaughan used to hang out till 5 a.m. there, that kind of club. And then over the years it changed. It was kind of always a music place, and he also had some other gig in the back. I think it was called the Red Room or something. But anyway, so who was there? Guys, Chris Wabich,
Oh, cool.
Ahmet Turkmenoglu on bass, Kerry Frank on keyboards, and Brad Rebuchin on guitar.
Yeah, I've been there before. It's like a jam session, right?
Well, that's what they used to do, but this is like new, since the COVID stuff, and it's in the front. It's not in the back.
Okay, yeah, I went there almost only a few months ago. Well, when I was teaching at Cal Arts in the fall, whenever that was, not long ago, just subbing for Joe.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a great room back there. I'd like to see it up front. Yeah,
Yeah.
just hung out down there with Bob Shepard. It was great.
Yeah. So, and I tell you, I walked in. It's not indoors. It's kind of outdoors with a thing over, whatever you call it. My words are not coming very well at all. This year, I'm like, what's the name of this? This is it's I know the name of this, anyway. But so the feeling, the music was not soft. It was just, it was just playing out, and the place was kind of full with people, and everybody was you could feel the energy. And when they stopped, the applause was like resounding, because I felt like everybody, the musicians were really playing. It felt probably great to them to play, and then the audience felt great to be there and to hear it and part of it. It was really a good feeling. I was so happy to go there, and they're doing it every 2 weeks. So,
oh, good,
great. Oh, Jason Harnell just joined.
Jason, what are you doing here?
Jason Harnell.
Yeah, Jason, I have to interview you too. You'll be a good interview.
My all-time favorite people.
Yeah. So, Alan, I don't think you and I bumped into each other that much when you were living here. I definitely bumped into Mark, and we played together, but I guess we just didn't do gigs together. So.
Yeah, probably in passing, but I think when I moved, 99.
Oh,
Geez Louise. I didn't really. I came back here and there, but in recent years I've been coming back a little more frequently. But I'm hoping that we cross paths more frequently.
yeah.
My hope is that I'll be getting out to LA a little bit more.
Cool.
Once things start to open up and so forth, I'd like to do more out there, and I actually have been working in the last 3 or 4 years. Working with vocalists has been something that's been keeping me very busy. Either full projects or isolated tracks for different, mostly for albums and so forth. But it's been a really great kind of development in my career to work with more singers and to, particularly, I guess specifically as an arranger, but just it's been so satisfying.
Huh, cool. Who are some of the singers?
Well, most recently I did a record for I did horn parts for a record for Lila Bialy, who's a
Oh, cool.
very
Yeah.
good singer in
Yeah.
Canada,
Hmm.
and
He's
worked with
really an interesting singer.
really great, yeah, and great pianist too. I worked on Sarah Gazarik's last recording, not the one. Uh, I can't remember what it's called, but it's the one prior to this last one with her new Sajay voices.
Oh, yeah.
So I had done some horn stuff for that. I did an entire big band record, arranged it for a great singer who's based in LA named Shoshana Bean, um, who kind of straddles R&B, Broadway, and jazz worlds.
Huh.
It, really fun record to work on. I mean,
Write
just
her name down. Shoshana Bean.
Shoshana Bean, yeah, she's in LA. And I've been doing a show for her every year since that record was done at the Apollo Theater,
Oh,
R&B Christmas show.
huh.
So that's writing mostly for, it's like a sort of a Motown
Yeah.
string section and small horn section,
Huh.
and a guy named David Cook who produces all these things. Um, Dave always hires me on to arrange a lot of it, so. Yeah. Anyway, and more. There's been a lot of other singers along the way, but those are some of the highlights, I suppose.
Yay, singers. Yay, trombone and singers. When I went to Berkeley years ago, and we had the first, the horn arrangement charts that you were supposed to write. And I don't know why, but almost everybody starts with sax and trumpet, right? It's not like they didn't tell us that. It's just everybody just does that. I was trombone and flute.
That's a cool combination. It's like
A lethal combination.
Lethal, yeah. Probably because I like the tone. The tones are beautiful. Michael Formanak says hi, and so does Josh Nelson.
all
Oh,
right.
nice. Hey, Mike. Hey, Josh.
More of my favorite people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, let's see. So you guys, I guess this is a group question, but you guys grew up where, and were you musicians right from the get-go? Was your family musical? How did the music sneak in?
That's yeah. I mean, yeah. I'm sure we both have different, well, same perspective on this, but I don't know. My mom was a guitarist growing up. She introduced us to music early on, and we had a we had a grandmother that is in musical. She's an actress. It's a lot of great movies.
Oh,
Um, what are some anchors away with
oh,
with Frank Sinatra?
wow.
Help me out here. Let's see.
Yeah, I mean, she did a lot of
He-
she did a lot of movies, but prior to doing movies. And by the way, I feel like your mic is a little low, Mark. I'm
Mine's
having a
low?
hard time hearing you.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit more input, whatever. Before she started doing movies, she got her start in New York doing Broadway shows. So she did the original Oklahoma
No.
and the original Brigadoon and Guys and Dolls. In fact, my mom was doing some COVID cleaning in the house, and she found an original lead sheet from Oklahoma that she used on the show of "Oh, What a Beautiful Morning." I mean, the handwritten
Wow.
sheet, which is kind of it was just at the bottom of a box.
What
But
was her name?
Pamela Britton.
yeah,
Pamela
That
Britton.
sounds
And
familiar, actually.
speaking of like sort of ephemera, I have these amazing photographs of my grandmother playing with Gene Krupa, um,
Singing?
singing with Gene Krupa's big band. Yeah,
Wow. Interesting. That's
incredible.
so
Yeah,
cool.
I believe that was New York, LA. I can't remember, but
Huh.
yeah. Unfortunately, we didn't get to know her. She died young of breast cancer
Oh,
in her 50s when she's doing a play with Don Knotts,
ah,
and actually he was the one that mentioned that her timing was a little bit off. Next day, she went to the hospital and was diagnosed with cancer and
wow.
died shortly thereafter. It was really tragic, but despite the fact that we didn't get to get to know her or hang out with her, I think that those genes and that kind of those musical genes sort of seeped
Mm-hmm.
into our musical genes somehow on my mom's side of the family. So through my mom, I think we had music in the house. My dad, not so much.
Mm.
He's kind of tone deaf. I mean,
I like how people say kinda tone deaf.
but he's but both were very supportive the entire time.
Yeah.
So like I said at the beginning, we sort of had this in our ear early on, and we grew up playing together. We grew up playing in all the ensembles in
Yeah.
school, and
Where was this?
yeah. Oh, in Northern California, a little town called Moraga,
Uh-huh.
and
Did
joined.
you guys were there one or several teachers who were extremely, mentorish or helped you out?
Definitely. I mean, I'll start. There's a guy named Ken Bergman who's my high school band director, and he was an incredibly charismatic director. I mean, he got really into it from the moment he would count the tune off. That's when I realized the importance of a count off. It's like this guy put so much energy into the count off, and it affected the entire tune. It influenced the way we played the tune, just the count off, and that alone, he was incredible. But he was also a great drummer and percussionist that played a lot of the shows up there. So he was probably one of my biggest influences on the drums. Just from his sheer energy that he put into his teaching, and also just the way he played, the way he taught the drums, and the way he it's kind of the energy that he put into his playing. That I would say I would mention him as probably a huge influence growing up as a drummer.
Yeah. Well, what about you, Alan?
Yeah, well, I would say my first teacher, well, our parents, of course. I mean, it can't be overstated the importance of just playing the music around the house. And anybody, I have two little boys now, and if Mike Formanek is on here, his son is just a phenomenally talented musician. I think there's something about just playing music.
Yeah.
Have it, not even talking about it, just having it coursing through the house almost at all times.
Yeah.
And that's kind of something my parents did. So that obviously it was beneficial, but and my mom sang a lot around the house too, which at the time I thought was super annoying, but now I realize like how beneficial that was. Um, uh, I had a teacher named Dean Hubbard. So yeah, Northern California, we grew up in the Bay Area, just to be more specific, East Bay, just a few minutes really from Berkeley and Oakland, where we, heard a lot of music at Yoshi's at the time was in this really cool little club. But anyway, I had a teacher named Dean Hubbard who was really, he changed the course of my life. I mean, I remember my first lesson. I had never had a trombone lesson. First of all, I went in there and he.
Why were you playing trombone? You hadn't had a lesson?
Very good question. I often ask myself that question.
One of those the teacher said, you have the perfect mouth for trombone, or we need a trombone player, or
Yeah, well, Mark and I were always tall from a pretty young age, and I did not want to play the trombone. I can say that confidently. Uh, but
I did though.
because I had long arms, I was just sort of thrust. Somebody, the band director thrust a trombone in. You're playing this, okay? And, so physiology basically is the reason I played trombone. I got into it a few years later. I wasn't really into it for a while, but I went to the Stanford Jazz Workshop, which was my first summer jazz camp, and that's when I really was exposed to players my age that were playing really well, and that's always inspiring. But then I met Dean Hubbard, who was my teacher, and he kind of, we had this lesson, and he was going through some technical things, and then I remember at the end of the lesson, I said, I kind of want to learn about jazz. I just gone to this camp, and I don't really know what I'm doing. Can we play along with something? And he pulled out a Jamie Ebersol play along, and he put it on. I remember, and I was tape recording the lesson. He put on. I played the first solo, and nobody needs to hear that. He played the second solo, and it was really one of those life-changing moments. Everybody has those specific moments where I sort of remember everything about it. But he played a solo, and I just couldn't really believe what I was hearing. And I went home and learned that solo. Backwards and forwards. I listened to that thing over and over, the tape rewind just over and over. And we essentially we would do that every week. But that first one in particular was really impactful because I just had never really heard it like that before. So yeah, he actually, just a quick story, he recently passed away. And his family has been selling off his equipment, and my birthday was a few months ago. For my birthday, I bought one of his mouthpieces, which I've been playing, this gold mouthpiece that he used to play in our lessons. And it's really kind of cool to be reconnected with Dean in that way. But yeah, he was huge. And, band directors as well, Ken Bergman. But Dean was, for me, like the big reason.
I think it's important to note that he was also the Peanuts cartoons. He was the voice of Snoopy with the plunger and the
parents. He was the voice of the parents.
The parents.
The parents had this sort of wow wow wow.
Oh yeah.
That was Dean's claim to fame, is that he developed that language.
That's funny. It's wild, when you come up with information like this. I'm always blown away by like these little facts. I've met several people here who, like one of my friends, his mother was in the party scene of with Audrey Hepburn and George Peppard and what's that famous movie?
Josh, help us out here, Josh.
Yeah, Josh. The famous movie of the jewelry store in New York, I think. Anyway, yeah, I mean, it's so interesting when you, like your grandmother, I also, my aunt, Vivian Segal, was the first performer in Pal Joey. And she had a relationship apparently with Larry Hart before thank you. Breakfast at Tiffany's. Thanks, Josh. And so she had a relationship with Larry Hart before, I guess, he came out being gay. And then I didn't realize she was here and alive for a few years when I moved here. Otherwise, I would have, of course, gone to see her. And I missed her just by, a little bit. But it's really interesting when you think about, like, can you imagine, how did your grandmother feel getting up with, it was Buddy Rich?
Gene Krupa.
Yeah. How must have that been in the moment, Wow. Amazing,
And I don't know the context behind this picture either. I don't know if this is a one-off or if it's on the road or what, but it's, and and there's no recorded evidence of this anywhere.
Yeah.
And who knows what else she did that I don't know about. I mean, my mom was the one to talk to in terms of, she's unearthed these pictures with the Dorsey brothers at a bar somewhere in Hollywood, flanked by the Dorsey brothers. I'm like, who knows what's going on there? But, and I have heard some recordings of her that were never released. She kind of has like a Blossom Dearie-esque voice. It's not, and she, again, like Alan said, she was on the original cast recording of Brigadoon. Yeah, so she, I don't know that. Yeah, getting back to the family thing.
Yeah, the lineage it goes deeper than that too, because our great grandmother was a big radio star in Chicago soap opera, and she was the Honeymooners. She was Ralph Cramden's mother-in-law, the nagging mother.
Get out of here!
That's our great grandmother. So she did a lot of radio and a fair amount of TV as well, and Broadway.
Wow.
They had shows at the same time in New York, which is kind of a crazy thing to think about.
My father owned a theater in East Boston, and Jackie Gleason actually came and performed there.
Wow.
And the Beatles movie, when it first played, it played there, and I was about 10, and I just didn't get why the girls were screaming, because it was a movie. You know, it wasn't like they were live or anything. I just didn't get it. But anyway, Taylor, Mark, he has a question for both of you. But Mark, he said, can you talk about your time playing with Jonathan Kreisberg and some of his early records?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Jonathan and I mean, he was kind of one of the first guys I played with in New York. It's like I met him on a wedding gig just in Midtown Manhattan somewhere, and totally random. I mean, and we, weirdly enough, we hit it off musically on this background wedding gig. I mean, it was just a chemistry playing together. And, you know, I was kind of with him like at the very beginning with a lot of pretty rough tours. Like he would book his own tours, and some of these things were pretty grueling, but we played a lot together on the road. And also he had a weekly gig at a place called La Lanterna in New York. It's a tiny little Italian restaurant, which is a great place to just hit every week, every Wednesday night, and develop and work on his music and just play it over and over every week. So like, you know, he's one of my oldest friends in New York, and definitely, you know, there's not much to say other than the fact that we spent a lot of years playing together. I haven't, you know, I sort of left the band around, say, 2012 or so, 2013.
Yeah.
And we haven't, you know, we play on and off now, but we did a lot of 5 records or something like that. And he's great. You know, I'm not totally sure what he's up to these days. I haven't been in touch with him, but that's basically the story. I mean, nothing, just met him on a random gig, and we started playing and made a lot of music together, and then came to an end at some point.
I was talking with Ahmet last night about, you know, I would go out. I went out a lot to hear music, you know, and I always recorded, you know, just on my little iPhone, and just for myself. But I've recorded a lot of great people. And one of the nights I recorded was when you and Ahmet, Larry Kuntz, and Otmaro played at the Blue Whale. Yeah. That was an amazing night. And I mentioned that I saw Larry just like literally stop playing with this look of awe and respect for Otmaro when he was like doing, you know, just playing with the trio. And that was a great night. Great music night.
That was maybe one of the last gigs there, maybe.
It could have been. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a special night for sure. I hadn't really played with Ahmet that much before, maybe once or twice. So
he's a great player.
He's incredible. Yeah. And of course, Larry. I've known Larry for a long time, and Otmaro too, but mostly Larry. And yeah, that was really, really great to do that. And I was very sad to see the Blue Whale go, but hopefully there'll be more Blue Whales. I
know. He had an amazing run. Something like 11 years, I think, right? Yeah. And of course, Alan's big band was there a bunch. And it was just, that was a really great place. Let's hear a little bit of music. Let's see. Mark, I mean, anything that you're probably going to say, oh, anything, because that's how you are. But I can just say Mark Ferber, and then I can see what comes up, and you
Yeah,
can
sure.
oh, Mark Ferber. But anyway, it came up good. Any suggestions on where to go? Oh, here.
Oh, gee, these are all so long. Maybe something just kind of short. Santiago. Just I see Santiago there.
Right here.
He's a great. Yeah, he's a great Argentinian. He was actually a student of Alan's too, I believe.
Hmm.
Also, Alex Goodman down there. That's a nice video as well. Maybe play that one, Alex's thing. It's probably the shortest of all of them. Yeah, he's a great young guitar player in New York.
Cool. So his name is Alex
Goodman.
Oh, Alex Goodman. I see. Oh, that's really nice. Um, I wanted to ask you. Wanted to ask you. I don't know if people ever ask you this question or not, but for me, this is a real question for you, Mark. You are you're a lovely drummer to watch. Your
Thank you.
movements are extremely. I've probably told you this before, I imagine, but your movements are very your movements are very graceful and fluid,
Hmm.
and 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 the time is still present and happening, so that the whole experience of watching and listening is a really great experience. Did you Was that just a natural occurrence? Did you think about that? Did you observe people who played interestingly to you?
I'm always learning from other drummers' body language for sure, definitely. But as far as those kind of motions, I think it's hard to really pinpoint, but I think it comes from this exercise that an early drum teacher, I think it was might have been Peter Ture, Steve Ture's brother. He was my first. He used to play with Ray Charles. He's a great drum teacher in the Bay Area, and he taught me this thing: the importance of of thinking about your arm and at 3 points. The wrist. The the elbow is another sort of point of mobility, and the shoulder. So he had me do these three exercises with what they call upstrokes and downstrokes, full strokes and tap strokes, which I'm not going to get into that. Um, but he sort of had you kind of like with the wrist. You start with the wrist, and you just kind of like you work on just simple strokes. That's an upstroke. You start low and high, or downstroke. You start high and low. Tap stroke is just a tiny little stroke, low, low, and then a full stroke is high, high to high. So it's that. There's four different strokes, and you're really kind of. I mean, it's pretty laborious and very basic, but at the same time, there's like an infinite number of sticking exercises you could do with this. The next is you do the same principle, but with your elbow at that breaking point, and then finally you do it with your entire arm. And he had me like doing these exercises where you're just bringing the arms all the way up. You're really utilizing the full mobility of the arm at that point. um, I I'm guessing that maybe that had a big reason of why I try to use why I use those kind of motions, those flowing motions, because from those exercises you do work on like that sort of attack where you're not just hitting it like that, like a straight line.
Yeah.
You're using your entire sort of mechanics of your arm to strike the drum or the cymbal, which gives it, you're putting a lot of, you're not hitting it loud, but you're putting a lot of force and gripping the stick lightly, so you get a big sound with not a lot of volume. And so I'm thinking that that's possibly those exercises, those real technical minutia exercises, are kind of what influenced that. But on top of that, just trying to envision a sound in my head that I like,
Yeah.
and whatever technique that I can use to get that sound, I will use it. And perhaps those motions just allowed for that sound to emanate from the drums. So that's probably the best way I can describe that whole trajectory in terms of my technique and the way I look when I play.
Yeah.
Perhaps I wasn't checking out any dancers or anything like that. It was just a natural motion, trajectory, evolution from those exercises, and then trying to get the sound that I wanted.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for answering that.
Sorry.
No. And Alan, Taylor also would like to know, when you were working on composing and arranging for Jigsaw, which piece would you say was the most fun to record? And was there a song that was challenging to finish? Good question, Taylor.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's pretty easy to answer the second part of that. uh, because the title track called Jigsaw was one that I had lived with that chart for a long time, but I had never really done it as a big band chart in a certain way, and I had arranged it prior to the recording session, obviously. Brought it in, and we ran it down on the first take, and it just wasn't right. I couldn't. It was another one of those things where I sort of assumed certain things would happen in the room, like as if the band was just supposed to read my mind. The chart wasn't giving me what I wanted it to, and I was getting. I think I and probably Mark was getting frustrated. There was a certain transition point that I was trying to get that wasn't happening to get into the body of the tune. And we did 2 takes. And I mean, the frustrating thing was that John O'Gallagher, who's just a phenomenal alto saxophonist, played 2, it was sort of written for Mark and John's dynamic in terms of, they play a lot trio. So I was trying to kind of sculpt this arrangement to feature that dynamic and to feature them individually. And I was kind of cutting off John O'Gallagher's flow a little bit with the arrangement. So we did 2 takes, phenomenal intros by Mark and John, which I felt like the arrangement got in the way of at the end, at the tail end. So I had to take a break, and I literally went to a room. We were recording at a place in Brooklyn called Systems 2, and there's a little Studio B. I went there and sat there by myself, and just closed my eyes and tried to think about why it wasn't working. And I was there for about 5 minutes, and I kind of I saw John Ellis, who's a great tenor player, and I said, "Hey, John, come here." He always gives me some good advice. I'm like, I think I know what to do, but what do you think? And so he's like, "Well, why don't you instead of bringing in the bass and the saxophones at the same time, just withhold the bass for a second, bring the saxophones in first, and then the bass." And I realized that 2 months before, when I was working, I had that version and I had scrapped it. And yes, that's it. That's what I needed.
Wow.
And so I called the band back into the room, and I said, "Okay, guys, we're gonna do this, and okay, so bass doesn't come in here." And so we staggered the entrances a little bit differently, and all of a sudden it worked beautifully. And of course, John and Mark played another phenomenal solo, and that was that. I mean, so we got it on that take, and we moved right along from there. So that was really stressful, though, because you get, and as anybody who's recorded a full big band in a studio knows, I mean, just the fact that you can get all those people in the same room at the same time is a minor miracle of logistics. Yeah. Then to actually capture the music the way you want to, usually with the right people, it happens very easily and smoothly. But in this particular case, because everything else went down very easily, in this particular case, it was like, oh man, I'm doing something wrong. It's my fault. And fortunately we figured it out, but it was a team effort.
Oh, wow. That's really, it's very intense. Yeah. Taylor, maybe we could play his request, Impulso from Jigsaw. He loves that.
Impulso?
Yeah.
You can certainly, do you want me to do it from here, or do you want to do it from there?
Where can I find it on YouTube or Spotify or or you can play it all?
Apple Music, Spotify will have it. Yeah.
Okay. And I have to tell you, I don't know if I ever told you this, but I probably didn't, just because we haven't talked about it. But I the first time I heard you play trombone, it was at an IAJE.
Oh wow.
It was a long time ago.
I remember those.
Yeah, and so for those of you who don't know what I'm referring to, it was the IAJE was the International Association of Jazz Educators, and which had like 8,000 people attending, and it was great. I mean, you'd be walking next to Chick Corea, it was really, wonderful. Now, Impulso, is this? Oh yeah, here we go. And so, Yeah, I mean, it was a great situation. And then I'm not sure if that was, I think it was actually a band that you were in. And you're going to laugh at this. I remember thinking, this is not your daddy's trombone. You know how they say that? And it's like, wow, it was, I don't know if I'd ever heard a trombone player play like that before. Before that moment. And it was very exciting.
Oh, that's I want to use that as a quote. It's not your daddy's trombone.
Yeah, it was just, wow, it was really great. And and I remember when I first found out what the trombone was and it was not all that long ago. It was a few years back. I'm not sure if Bob McChesney told me or somebody else, but when I understood what it takes to play trombone, especially slide trombone, I was like, I was just shocked that, and kind of bowled over that it's such a challenging instrument to play. I was just so intrigued.
Yeah, a lot of people are doing interesting things with it too. I mean, I know in Michael Formanek's ensemble, Colossus, which is his big band, which unfortunately that was one of the gigs that was taken away from due to COVID. We were supposed to play at SF Jazz, but there's a really great he has a really cool trombone section, and one of the trombone players is actually from the LA area, from Santa Barbara, named Ben Gerstein. We studied with the same teacher, Bill Booth, and he takes this really, I mean, he does this thing where he uses double reeds, like bassoon reeds or whatever, through the trombone mouthpiece, and it creates this sort of
inside or outside.
Yeah, inside of it, and it creates kind of almost like a processed effect, but it also sounds like nature. I mean, it's almost impossible to describe, but if I would point people toward that record. It's called The Distance, Michael Formanek, and check out that. I don't remember the name of the track offhand, but it's really, I mean, right when you think you know that you think you've heard it all with the trombone, check that out.
Oh,
A highlight for me to kind of hear that multiple times because we played that music a lot. But I was like, yeah, I've heard it all.
all right. Well, let's hear a little bit of so Impulso. I'll play that one. So this I'll just share the screen for a second. But this album has 7 cuts on it, and you were talking before about Jigsaw, right? Being the challenging one.
That was a challenging one. Yeah, it was a challenging one to get out of the intro.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was I mean, otherwise it was a really fun record to make. The easiest one, Taylor had asked, it was probably this tune Get Sassy, which I've had for a long time, but I had no intention of including it on the album. But I had more music than I needed. 2 of the things that we recorded have yet to be released. And I hope to release them at some point, but so I just did Get Sassy at the end for fun. And it was like, we didn't rehearse it, nothing. They hadn't really, I guess we had played it before, but anyway, it just went down super easily and ended up making the record. So I suppose that was the easiest one.
Okay. Well, here's Impulso. Oh, that's great.
Oh, thank you. It makes me miss playing with people, hearing that.
Yeah, I can dig that. Yeah, that's really wonderful. I wanted to ask you actually. I wanted to ask you about your writing and arranging. Did you have mentors in that area?
Yeah, I did.
Whether they were alive or not. I mean, people that you followed or loved or?
Well, wow, that's a quite a list. I mean, the I would say that my big mentor in when I was in college, for writing, and it wasn't because I was taking any lessons with him, but he was my director. Was Gerald Wilson,
Oh,
Anthony's father,
yeah.
who I always admired his music and just how bold and brash and in your face it was. Um, and I love playing it with him in front of the band, dancing around him. He wouldn't really conduct as much as he would dance. If he was dancing, then you were doing something right. If he was just kind of standing there, then you had to, you know, you had to put some more time into it. But I think absorbing that his aesthetic and hanging out with him, talking to him, uh, was a huge influence on me. There were a couple of students that I was yeah, at school with in UCLA that were also hugely influential in terms of writing. One was Justin Morel, who's an amazing writer and guitarist, um, and continues to be. He keeps on churning out amazing music.
Huh.
He teaches in Pennsylvania now,
Oh,
and he but he's from LA, and his dad John Morel was he played with Miles and was a big studio player in LA, and very just a and they also had a recording studio in their house, so I did my first recording session there.
huh.
Uh, and John DeVersa, who was also he's a trumpet player, and he and Justin and Mark and I have to mention Todd Sikafus too, who's a bass player who was also we were all kind of at school at the same time.
Uh-huh.
They were all writing a lot of music, John, Justin, and Todd, and just being a part of their projects and around it. David Ake, that's another one. David Ake, the pianist. Um, I was in all of their bands, as was Mark, and we do. I think it was very inspiring to me to just be involved in their projects, and they were just churning out stuff. And the way they led bands and the way they kind of sculpted sets, how they kind of shaped a set of music was something I really paid attention to. How they used the trombone, how they conceptualized trombone in their music, was super inspiring. So I was not necessarily inspired by big band writers. I mean, not directly in school. In other words, I was very much just from playing the music, but some of my big band writing heroes, Duke Ellington, of course, is one of the biggest, and Kenny Wheeler was a huge influence too for me. And partly, I had a chance to play one of my favorite, the Sweet Time Suite, which is one of my favorite pieces for big band ever written. I got a chance to play with Kenny twice, split by 15 years, and that was pretty influential. So, I mean, the list goes on and on, but I think that I would start there as early influences, and then as I've been in New York, I've been, I very involved in the big band scene, and both in performing and recording, and have been immersed in so many perspectives on the big band, and people bringing in their own kind of folk music, or the music that they grew up with, and how that's filtered into a jazz big band instrumentation, and how it's filtered into the jazz big band language. It's so vast, the perspectives that you get through the big band in as I've been in New York, that it's all kind of filtered into my own aesthetic and my own writing. So I generally have a pretty broad, stylistic brush,
Yeah.
but I do like to filter it through a clear voice, which I'd like to think I have a clear voice as a writer and arranger, but it does draw from a lot of different sources. I tend to be pretty open-minded with what I listen to and what I absorb.
Yeah.
So
One one
yeah.
thing I
Would you say
remember.
that? Would you say that? Would you say that the when I think of big band, and I don't know if I'm a typical listener. I might be better in a certain area and worse in a certain area, but when I think of big band, I mean, my dad was a sax player, and I grew up around his bands, and him listening to big bands. That was what we grew up around, and so there were some very standard, what I remember to be very standard, straight ahead kind of charts and bands. And then there were bands that I started to hear the harmony was different, and now you just kind of brought in also an idea which touches on, for me, for instance, what has happened to jazz over the last 20 years, the influences that have come in pretty significantly, folk, rock, classical, I mean, with the advent of using string players a lot, and so I'm not sure what I'm asking, but do you see that? I mean, you just brought up several different arrangers. I mean, when I think of LA arrangers, I think of Bill Holman and Steve Hofstetter, for bands that I really liked to listen to, David Angel. So do you see big bands in certain genres or certain paths, arranging wise, composition wise? Again, I'm not sure of the question I'm asking. Maybe you can see what I'm asking.
Um, I see big bands as a way to create community. I think one of the reasons people do it is to bring improvisers together. I mean, well, there's a couple motivations. Some people, and there are a lot of different kinds of big band writers. I mean, Bob Brookmeyer, towards the end of his life, was writing episodic multi-movement works where he was kind of trying to get rid of the improvisation in the big band. He said only write an improvisation if it's the very last thing you can do. He was trying to write essentially classical pieces framed in a big band context, which is very different from his earlier work with Jerry Mulligan and the Finnegan, Sauter Finnegan big band, some of the earlier things he was doing. But I think at the end of the day, I mean, no one, no one's choosing to do a big band because it's easy to put together and because you're going to make a lot of money. So you have to kind of ask yourself, why are people still doing this? And I think, and I can only speak for myself, but I think that generally this is true. That for me, I think first of all, I love to write. The process of writing is very relaxing, not always the case, but there's something very satisfying about creating something from nothing, which you can do in a quartet setting, but there's something about a big band that it gets you into the craft, I guess, which there's a long history, and I love studying the craft and different perspectives on it. So just the act of writing is very satisfying, and it sort of improves the quality of my life. Just doing it and creating something, and wow, here it is. The world now has this thing and this grand statement of this piece. But also, again, it creates community, so it's a really great excuse to get your friends together, or people you're really inspired by, or some kind of a soup pot jambalaya of like the coolest combination of musicians you can think of, both as personalities and improvisers and ensemble players, and see what happens. It's like a chemistry experiment or something. And I love that idea of experimenting with different combinations of people to see how that kind of transpires through sound. And the hang is great, or it can be. so, So I think all those things for me, it's like I think for me, it's like it's important for jazz to have a community. That's why this past year has been so hard. There's just we've been forced out of the community and haven't been able to hang together. And I think that's a huge component of jazz as a music. It relies on community and personal interaction. So I think for big band, for me as a writer, there's something really cool about thinking about all these different personalities when I'm sitting down to write a piece of music, and it gets me closer, in a way, kind of closer to them as I'm writing, and makes me think about people, which is a really soulful thing, I think. And it's a good motivating factor to write when you are writing for people, not just for instruments or for a MIDI sound. So I think these are big reasons why we do it. And I think it really comes down to me. It really comes down to community and bringing people together and making kind of art that sometimes is accessible and sometimes is not. I don't, and that's the thing about big band, is I don't really care if people understand everything I'm putting out there. As long as it has a vibe and an attitude and a very clear message. I kind of like divisive responses to my music where I love that, or God, I hate that. I like both of those things probably equally as much. Well, maybe I like I love it more, but the kind of the tepid, yeah, it was cool. I'm not going for that. If I'm going to do a big band, I want one or the other, but not something. That's not worth it.
Sounds great, man.
Mark, do you have anything
Well,
want?
one thing when he was talking, or when you were talking about the arranging side of putting music together, and one thing I've talked to Alan about is the trombone being well situated in the band, geographically speaking. The trombone section is in between the saxophones and the trumpets, and you've got sort of flanked by the rhythm section, and you've got the conductor right in front of you. It's a great place to be within the ensemble, to hear every part, to hear every voice. You're right in front of, for better or for worse, trumpet, the lead trumpet, 1, 2, 3, and 4. You're right in a line with 4 voices of trombones, and then you're right behind the saxophone. So you get this, I would imagine, you get this great sonic point of view, in which to learn how big bands are, how sorry about this, how those sounds are put together, how those harmonies are put together. It just existing in a section and playing all these different kinds of composers, different kinds of music. I think it's why trombonists, you mentioned Bob Brookmeyer, but yeah, horn players in general make great big band writers, because they're not only do they get to hear in the section, but they get to move around to different chairs and hear how, okay, this is what trombone 3 is doing, this is what saxophone 2, whatever. It's you get the luxury of sort of like almost playing and hearing how these parts are put together, which rhythm sections don't necessarily have that luxury. Not to say, I mentioned Formanek, who's one of my all-time favorite bass players, and his big band is incredible. Like he's just got an amazing ears, but he can hear. He's as a rhythm section player, bass, drums, and piano, we're apart from the horns, most of the time. So which is all the more power to how he can hear into the section. But anyway, I just thought, I was thinking about that when you guys were talking about arranging and writing and the compositional process.
I have to say, one of my favorite bands I ever heard in my life was the Mingus Big Band. Wow. I was just totally, and part of it was the improvisers, but the writing was just so electrifying. The whole thing was electrifying.
Yeah, I love big bands with individual voices, individual personalities.
Yeah.
I love hearing big bands where you can hear in the section, not necessarily when they're soloing, but in the section, you can hear each personality in the section, as opposed to like the approach where it's just kind of monochromatic. Everyone's got to blend together, and everyone's got to phrase together, and everyone's got to, there's of course there's an extent of that, but the Mingus band to me sort of represents a lot of that. That sort of like
Yeah.
joyful sort of feral way of playing, where people are just playing who they are, as if they're playing in a small group, but via a big band. And so you get this great, very unique, quirky, huge sound. Mingus' music is all about that, of course, just inherently.
Yeah, really great. And also, I mean, while we're talking about interesting groups, Vinny Golia, you guys know Vinny?
Course,
I mean, and that's like kind of a whole different thing. Like I guess his charts are a lot less written per se, and like it might say, okay, trombones playing B or something, something like that. And I've seen large groups that he's gotten together, and that's a whole other interesting thing. And it has this ability, and all great music does, I think, but it has this ability to literally create this physical and spiritual sensation that you're opening up. And I mean, what could be better than that?
Absolutely. Yeah, the conduction thing, I used to see Butch Morris, what was that club called in the East Village?
Yeah, the
New Blue.
New Blue, yeah.
He passed away a number of years ago, but Butch Morris is an incredible leader of big bands. So he'd do completely conduction. He would just like what you're describing with Vinny, sort of. He just sort of conducts. He knows what he wants, and he just kind of has different sections do different things in the moment, and it creates this totally different effect than something that's scripted out in advance. But it's equally really cool when pulled off.
Yeah, let's see, what was it? Years ago when I was first here, when I was very young, and we had a great club in Venice called the Come Back Inn, where a lot of people like us would go and play, and a lot of original music was going on back then. Monsieur Santos would play there, and he would do that with a smaller group, like maybe four horns, or and he would. That's how he would do it. He wouldn't have. I mean, he'd have the general chart of the song, but other than that, he would actually live create these arrangements, and it was pretty wonderful. He was just so musical anyway.
Well, speaking of Vinny Golia, that was one of my the first big bands I played with.
Oh.
And that sort of idea of sound painting, in a way, was yet another perspective on that format. So yeah, I mean, very different than a Bill Holman style writer, which is lots of counterpoint and so forth. But I mean, we could talk about this all day, but it is something that Mark is right. As a trombone player, you look down the list. I've been reading Nelson Riddle's book on, his book called Arranged by Nelson Riddle, which is a great book for arrangers, any arrangers out there. He was a trombone player. Billy Byers was a trombone player. I mean, you go down the list of arrangers, there's a reason, I think, because trombone players exist in this world of counterpoint underneath the primary melodies. I think that's why I love arranging for singers too, because I just have always existed in counterpoint. I very rarely get to play the melody that is like highlighted. So to write something around a lyric, a primary theme, comes kind of naturally. It feels like I don't have to work too hard to figure it out. And I think that's just not just because I'm a trombone player.
This brings to mind the Nancy King Metropole Orchestra record. I don't know if you guys have heard that, but Nancy King is, to me, like for my tribe of singers, Nancy King is, a queen. She's her singing is so uniquely her, and totally 300,000% musical. And when she was doing that recording, she's not a very straight kind of person. She's very free. And so Steve Christofferson, her pianist, he said to the arrangers, he said, so Nancy's going to do whatever she wants. So you're not going to be writing like, what you were just saying, like to a melody exactly. I mean, she might sing the melody, but she's going to be very free all over the place. And it was a really beautiful record. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but it's gorgeous.
I haven't heard that particular record, although I've heard a lot of Nancy King, and I've actually arranged one of her charts. She's amazing.
Yeah.
Her cat singing is ridiculous.
And I should share both of these with you, but Tim Weston, you guys know Tim Weston?
Not personally, no.
Yeah. So, he's a guitarist and arranger, and, his dad was Paul Weston, and, his mom and dad did that joke. Joe Stafford and Paul Weston, they did the joke duo, whose name I can't remember right now, but where she sings like half a tone off, and he's playing piano and adds and subtracts. It just it's great. Anyway, but Tim did a few orchestral records, and this one record that it's like one of my desert island records. He had each song was a different arranger and a different artist featured. And it was a tribute to Rodgers and Hammerstein. And amongst my favorite ones was Nan Schwartz's arrangement of Mark Murphy's singing This Nearly Was Mine. Gorgeous. And then the other one was Van Dyke Park's arrangement for the song that I had never heard of called Everybody's Got a Home But Me, who originally was supposed to have a rock singer do it, but the singer couldn't accomplish it. So they last minute gave it to Nancy, and it was just really incredible. Great arrangement. And yeah, I'll have to share that with you guys. Really, really terrific. Yeah. John Prue is here, by the way. He said hi. And Tierney.
Oh, Tierney.
Hey, Tierney. Hey, John.
I just have to imagine they're here. I can't see them or anything.
Yeah,
I know. So here's a question about education, which, we've been talking about that in various groups. But again, Taylor, he's a good question person. He said, between the both of you, are there areas of music education that you think should be changed or emphasized more for students who are wanting to pursue a degree in jazz studies?
I think the price should change.
The price for university?
Tuition, yeah. I mean, I think it's getting to be across the board pretty ridiculous, like the way, the inflation rate of tuition prices and room and board and so forth. It's getting to be unsustainable.
all the burden is being put on the student at this point. I mean, and that's escalated very rapidly over the last 15, 20 years, I feel. I mean, yeah, and it's definitely, I mean, music, I don't know. It's I teach. Alan's probably got a better perspective on this because he's at NYU, and I've dabbled at places like CalArts, but what should change? I have to think about it. Alan, why don't you take it over? I got to think about this.
Well, I think that you mentioned IAJE and there's Jen, and one thing that's become very apparent is that there's a lot of books written about how to play jazz, implying that there's some kind of shortcut to learning how to do it. And quite frankly, there are a lot of books that try to provide shortcuts. There's only one real way to learn how to play jazz, and that's the long way. I mean, you've got to do it slowly, and you've got to spend a lot of time. So, I mean, one thing I emphasize with my students is that jazz is a language. It's and it sort of has to be absorbed and learned like you learn a language. And I mean, I'm not. It's not. This is not an opinion. This is like scientific studies have been done. Literally, somebody stuck into an MRI machine while improvising a
Oh,
solo changes. They studied the brain. They did this at I think MIT. Studied what parts of the brain were activating during the moment of improvisation, and it was basically all language, the language parts of the brain.
hmm.
So, with that in mind, if you're trying to teach improvisation, if you're trying to teach a language to somebody, particularly when somebody's just starting out, by sort of teaching them, a method out of a book, in other words, it's you're sort of going about it in the opposite direction. I think the first thing that has to happen, it has to be emphasized, is just absorption, just listening. Um, a sort of a constant absorption of the language, and like Clark Terry said, imitate, assimilate, innovate, in that order.
Say
Um,
that again.
well, he famously said, this is how you learn how to improvise. You imitate, assimilate, and innovate,
Hmm.
and you've got to do it in that order.
Yeah.
So whatever a teacher does, you have to front load the imitation part as part of the learning process. So if you have a student that is trying to learn jazz, they have to start by essentially and listening to the records and absorbing the records. Because I think another important thing to point out is that for those people that are trying to learn it from written down transcriptions on paper, I mean, Dexter Gordon's eighth note looks the same as John Coltrane's eighth note on paper. Uh, and this is something that uh, I think is an important point. They look the same on paper, they're eighth notes, but if you listen to them on the record, they're not the same at all.
Hmm.
And so you lose a lot of the nuance and the humanity of how to sort of phrase or express a melody and put together phrases if you're trying to just sort of learn it from anything other than the recorded source. So anyway, I could go on and on, but I think the primary, the most important thing is just to try to imitate, and then from there, sort of play like the masters, and put it, sort of frame it in your own way, apply it to solos when playing with your friends or whatever. And then that's really the only, because a lot of people are like, well, how do you find your own voice? How do you find, find a
Yeah,
voice?
we're all
Well,
asking that. Yeah.
it doesn't happen overnight. It all comes very slow. It's this very slow progression, and it's very laborious. I mean,
Hmm.
there's fun aspects to it, but it's a lot of work of learning an entirely new language. And if you don't do every step of the process, then it's just simply not going to translate. It's not going to work.
Another
Hmm.
important thing to mention is Alan and I didn't go through the music educational system per se. We studied at UCLA. I studied biogeography, and that's what I got my degree in. And Alan studied economics,
Oh,
respectively. So we weren't necessarily products of the educational system.
yeah.
So which is why I had a hard time as someone who didn't go through it. I sometimes have a hard time answering that question because I simply wasn't in it. I mean, I take part in it now as a teacher,
Yeah.
but I think the learning process for me was different, obviously because I wasn't in the system. I didn't go through 4 years or 6 years or whatever it is of studying music in college, which and there's holes in my development for sure, in my music, because of that. On the flip side, I think I think people, if you're really serious about playing music, and you need to just commit yourself to it 100%, whether you're studying it or not. You need to you need to live and breathe the music. If you put on a record and you're not enjoying it, if you're not absorbed in it completely, then you have to ask yourself why. You know, when I listen to music, and I've been doing that a lot in the pandemic at night, um, I it's such a great time for me because I'm able to just focus on the music, and it brings me so much enjoyment and fulfillment. And also I'm learning, and and I'm taking notes on some things that maybe I want to apply in my own playing. And what Alan and I did when we graduated college, and I recommend this to a lot of my students, is to just play all the time. I mean, that's really how you develop a voice. I think you need to listen, you need to study, but what you need to do is actually play for real in real time with people every day. That's the way you develop your chops, your technique. That's the way you develop the ability to play with other people and how you fit into the picture of an ensemble. What's my role, in a big band, small groups, whatever opportunities come about, take it, take every gig, and you learn from every single experience, I think. And so yeah.
I think that's easier said than done too. I think that's important to communicate. But I've had a lot of students over the years. I primarily have taught at the college level, but I'll say this to them. But there's a lot of fear that gets in the way.
I agree.
A lot of people are more introverted. I'm naturally introverted. It took a lot of effort to call people up and ask them to play with me, because it's kind of a scary proposition. You're like asking people to come over, and then you're just bearing your soul. Like you're just essentially showing them how you play, which is not necessarily an easy thing to do. So I always tell especially my more introverted students, that it does take practice, and start small. Maybe just a duo at first, then you can expand to a trio, and gain confidence with being around people. And again, getting back to the community of a big band, it took me a long time to get to that point. It's not like I just went straight to 18 musicians. I really did gradually work from me and Mark playing together as a duo. And I kind of just tacked on one by one, and gained confidence incrementally, and found holes in my playing along the way. I certainly still find plenty of holes in my playing, but I'm always trying to work on it. And but that's that's the slow process. It's like a slow build, and part of the process involves tripping and falling, and like, ooh, that hurt, and you get up and you try it again.
Right.
Try to just stay in it.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to mention that, because I think it seems like an obvious thing to do, but in practice, it's a little more difficult than. And the other thing is, like, we're sort of hopefully kind of climbing out of this pandemic slowly. We have all lost the ability. I think our ability to socialize with humans has been greatly degraded. That's a muscle that needs to be exercised, and we're going to find a lot of socially awkward moments in our near future as we start to interact with people again, face to face. And it's just going to be a very slow climb back to just normal interaction personally, but also, musically, although so I think that, people just need to be proactive in this day and age, for sure. Just do it. So.
I mean, as you're talking, I'm, of course, thinking of my own universe. And I think as a teacher, which we all are, you see this a lot. And I mean, this subject comes up all the time, and definitely singers. And I'm always kind of bemoaning the fact that singers who are semi-pros or amateurs, they have it a lot tougher than I did, because I grew up in a time where we were working 10 gigs a week. You know, we were working casuals and, you know, club gigs and jazz gigs. We were doing everything every single day, you know, and yeah, you fell on your face a lot. You got a chance to see how your technique was working, how work on your time, you know, decide who you liked in the band. I mean, there were so many lessons that were so available. And yeah, and I have a whole, you know, being the singer student, there's a whole litany of singers who just, you know, kind of are fearful. Like you said, they're fearful of going out there and calling up somebody. And I, you know, I try and coerce them, like, go get the gig. Just here's how you go and get the gig. You know, you just shake someone's hand and you talk to them. You don't even have to have music. You can just actually sell yourself like that, and then call me and I'll help you get the piano player. You know, I mean, you know, you have a gig Saturday night, great. We'll find a piano player, easy. And sometimes I suggest that they go to schools, you know, music schools or universities, the music department, and put up a sign, and you know, they want to sing with a student. There's nothing wrong with that, you know. Get into, like you said, you know, the one-on-one, and things come up that you learn, and there's, I mean, you can hear about it till the cows come home, but until you do it, you know, that's where the learning comes.
Yeah, unquestionably.
Yeah, I agree completely. Yeah, you just gotta do it. Yeah, I mean, Alan and I both, yeah, definitely are both introverts, and it was especially when, you know, you move to New York, you hear all these people, you start calling these people that you just only heard on records. You know, you see them in this certain light. It's like the most terrifying thing that could possibly happen is having them come to your house and play a session. But that, for me, that was those were the moments that were the biggest learning experiences for me, and we're able to overcome my fears of playing with people like that.
Yeah.
You have to do that, or else it's never gonna, you know, you're never gonna get to that point.
Yeah. And there's so much of what we're talking about that is, you know, mental, spiritual, whatever perspective. I mean, look at what Kenny Werner did at Berkeley. He created a whole friggin' department called Effortless Mastery for the last 6 years, which when I found that out, I was blown away. I was just, wow, that is so cool. You're training people to deliver that information because, you know, as we know, practicing music and practicing it and practicing playing it brings so much to general life. You know, it's really a benefit for people to learn music, a musical instrument, or how to get along with people, or how to improvise. And I mean, and I kind of think that the pandemic has brought that a little more to light. I really do, because there's been so many videos and, you know, people talking about it, events, and also people looking for, you know, regular people looking for interesting things on the internet, TED Talks and all that stuff. And I really think that the realization that music is, you know, really an intricate part of the clothes that we put on our bodies and minds has really come forth this past year, which is a pretty cool thing, you know. And yeah, I just think it's.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is that I mean, for people like me, and maybe just to generalize, and I'm not saying all of, like, sort of older musicians that have been around for a little bit while longer. I have a hard time, you know, sort of now creating online content, because that's a whole other way of putting yourself out there, and it's sort of it's like the newest version of doing a gig or something. So,
Yeah.
you know, this isn't directed toward just young musicians. This is for everybody. For me, I'm like grappling with, okay, I got to create more or I feel like I should create more online content to increase opportunities for myself. And that in and of itself is kind of terrifying in a way that is not at all for a younger musician who sort of, that was their normal from the get-go. So there are layers of this stuff of putting yourself out there that
It's interesting that you both say you're introverted. I can't tell you how many people have said that to me on this show. People I don't think of as introverted at all. I mean, you guys, when I've talked to you both, I have not thought that you were introverted at all. I've thought that you were, especially you, Mark, kind of more on the quiet side, but I wouldn't think of it as introversion, you know. But and for some reason, Alan, I must have talked to you when you were being funny or outgoing, because I thought you were kind of kooky.
Alan's funny.
Yeah,
I haven't seen that side of him.
Introversion has a lot of gradations, I guess. I mean, you can be both introverted and extroverted. I suppose.
My dad actually
quiet that gets into this. It's really kind of an amazing book.
Yeah, that's exactly. I was going to mention that. My dad just gave me that. You read that, right? I think.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's not a black and white.
Which book is this?
It's called Quiet.
Oh,
it's about introverts. It's about exactly what we're talking about.
Really famous introverts, and So anyway, it's yeah. So, but it comes down to, I think probably what it comes down to is getting past the fear of it all. So.
yeah. I actually think, I mean, now that we're talking about quiet and introversion and this, I mean, there are moments that I am quiet, especially in a group of people, and I can be like totally quiet and not giving my opinion and just not jumping in and, being this person that I am right now. And I guess that's, like you say, a layer of introversion, and yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, for me, it was like the reason I like music as an introvert, I guess, if we're talking on that subject, is because I could express myself. I was confident in that side of myself. I was confident in my playing, and I was able to sort of be extroverted.
Yeah.
With my playing.
Yeah.
Always, every time. I've always felt comfortable behind the instrument.
Huh.
Much more so than in front of a microphone speaking to people. Like I'm very at home in front, and I let that do the talking for me, which has been great. I mean, and I obviously love doing it, and I love studying it, listening to it, everything about it I love. So it's the greatest way to express my passion for for what it is. So, but yeah, I mean, it's a whole different way of expressing yourself than, for example, just talking. It's just a different. And I think a lot of musicians are. You mentioned on your show you're surprised by the number of people saying that they're introverts. I think the reason you get into music and a lot of these kinds of people is for that very reason.
Excuse me. I have a chronic cough. Well, believe it or not, it's been 2 hours.
Wow. Look at that.
Yeah, you guys have been really enjoyable to speak with, and yeah, it's been just really nice, a nice hang. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Should we be looking out for anything coming up for you guys?
Well, I'm working on a project, which I'll be releasing as soon as I can. I'm documenting speaking of big band, some new big band things. In addition, I'm doing a project with my wife, who's a cellist and a singer, and we're working on a duo project. We finished a Bach project.
I think I saw that on Spotify or something. What is her name?
Her name's Jody Redditch Ferber, and we've been working as a duo, which has been really, really great, particularly during the pandemic. So we hope to record that, soon. So and a few other projects, but those for myself, I think those are the main things on my radar are getting these new big band things out, which obviously I'm recording in a roundabout way, not with everybody in the same room, but that actually has been really cool, as well to kind of troubleshoot that in a way that makes it musical and interactive. So, yeah.
And for myself, I mentioned this gig that Alan and I went out to New York for. This album that we're both involved in it. Her name is Ji-Hye Lee, and she did a great big band record that was put together, produced by Darcy James Argue, and that's going to be coming out. Just to give her a little shout out, just because it'd be nice for people to be aware of her. I think that's going to be coming out fairly soon. That album, and also I know Mike was here for a minute, but we did this recording under the New Jersey Turnpike with Tony Malaby, a trio recording, totally improvised, and that's going to be coming out, I believe, in the beginning of April. It's just it's under Tony. It's under Tony kind of put it all together, and he just has this guy comes down with the mics, and it's in an incredible scene.
Wow.
I mean, it's post-apocalyptic, skateboarders, graffiti, trash. I mean, the whole thing in the most unlikely of locations. But he's documenting all these free improvisations under the turnpike, right where it goes down before you get to the Holland Tunnel.
Wow.
So, and I was, I listened back to it, and it was really great to do it. And I like I said, Mike is one of my favorite guys to play with as an improviser, and as well as Tony. So I don't know, look out for that. That should be coming out in a
That's
couple
cool.
weeks.
Tony Malaby. Wow. Haven't heard his name for a while.
Alligator Lounge. Remember that place?
Yeah. Wow. That's so cool. Very cool. Well, I do also want to tell the listening public tomorrow, I'm doing live 3 days a week, and then I'm posting archives on the rest of the week, 4 days a week. So anytime you want to come on around 12 o'clock, you will see something, but live Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And tomorrow I have a drummer from New York. You guys probably know him, Bob Mayer.
I know Bob very well. Yeah,
Bob. And then Wednesday, I have a great singer, creative artist, Theo Bleckman.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that too. So, yeah, and for you guys just wanting to know who's posting this week, Gary Hoffman, who happens to be my husband, and he was, amongst other things, he was a lighting board operator on The Tonight Show for 20 years. So I always wanted to know more about what he had done. So it was great because it was 2 hours just talking to him about that. And Nolan Shahid, great trumpet player, Tanya Grubbs, and Amy Nolte, great piano player and singer. So that's this week, and hope you guys have a great day. And you guys, again, just really nice to hang out in your universe. Thanks you so much,
Cathy.
Yeah,
Thank you so much,
Cathy.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, have a great day or night.